visual pathway. So this is eyeball. Light rays passes through the pupil, perceived by the retina, carried by the optic nerve, and finally it reaches the visual cortex present in the occipital lobe. So what are the parts of visual pathway? Eyeball, optic nerve, crossing over is optic chiasm, optic tract, relays in the lateral geniculate body, and this is geniculocalcarine tract. The temporal fibers of geniculocalcarine tract is called Meyer's loop. Other side, the fiber is called non-Meyer's loop. And finally it reaches the calcarine sulcus present in the visual cortex. How the rays from the visual field are perceived by the retina. Since the light rays travel in the straight line, the nasal visual field will be perceived by the temporal half of retina. Similarly, temporal visual field are perceived by the nasal half of the retina. So here you can see these are the nasal fibers, blue one. These nasal fibers crosses in the optic chiasm and it reaches the lateral geniculate body. The red one, the fibers are from the temporal half of the retina. These fibers, they go uncrossed and reaches the lateral geniculate body. From here it relays in the calcarine sulcus of the visual cortex. So how to remember? See, the right lateral geniculate body, it receives the fibers from the temporal half of retina on the same side and nasal fibers from the opposite side, which means right side of both the eye. Fibers from the right side of the retina relays in the right lateral geniculate body. Similarly, left side you can see temporal fibers from the same eye and the nasal fibers from the opposite eye, that is fibers from the left side of the retina relays in the left geniculate body. Now let's talk about the defects. So if there is a lesion in the optic nerve, there is complete loss of vision in the affected eye. So here the right optic nerve is affected, so blindness occurs in the right eye, which is called right side anopia. Anopia is total blindness. Next, if there is a lesion in the optic chiasm, nasal fibers from both the eye are affected. So if the nasal fibers are affected, there is temporal loss of vision in the visual field. So this is called bitemporal hemianopia. Next, there is a lesion in the optic tract, which means ipsilateral temporal fibers and contralateral nasal fibers are affected. So we have visual loss of field in same side nasal and opposite side temporal region, and this is called homonymous hemianopia. Similarly, if the geniculocalcarine tract is affected, it also results in the homonymous hemianopia. When there is a defect in the visual cortex, there is blindness in the opposite half of the visual field, but with the macular sparing. So the macula is not affected. And if there is a lesion in the upper lip of the calcarine sulcus, opposite eye lower quadrant is affected, which is called contralateral inferior quadrant anopia. So if it is upper lip, lower quadrant is affected. If it is lower lip, upper quadrant, opposite eye upper quadrant is affected. What if the macula is affected? So let's draw the lateral side of eyeball, cornea, sclera, and the site of optic nerve emerging optic disc, and this is called macula, which is otherwise called fovea centralis. So in case of macular degeneration, and it can also be called as central scotoma, here only the macular part is affected. Blindness in the central region called central scotoma. So just summarize the visual pathway. Now the first order neuron in the visual pathway is bipolar cells present in the retina. These bipolar cells, they have dendrites, cell body, and the terminal axons. The dendrite synapse with the photoreceptors present in the retina. Those are rods and cones, whereas the axons, they synapse with the ganglion cells, and these ganglion cells are called as second order neuron. Second order neuron. The axons of these ganglionic cells, they synapse in the lateral geniculate body. Lateral geniculate body, they are involved in the visual pathway. Can remember lateral L for light, and the medial geniculate body is for auditory pathway. And this lateral geniculate body will be the third order neuron, which carries the fibers to the occipital lobe. So apart from synapsing with the lateral geniculate body, the axons of ganglionic cell, they also synapse in the pretectal nucleus present in the midbrain, which reaches the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. From the Edinger-Westphal nucleus, it is carried by oculomotor nerve to relay in the ciliary ganglia present near the eyeball. From the ciliary ganglion, short ciliary nerves, they supply the muscle called sphincter pupillae, which is responsible for light reflex, both direct and consensual light reflex.